Now, the Independent Electoral Commission wants parties who are planning to contest next year's elections to pay more money. It's suggesting that these organizations pay 300,000 Rand, up from the current 100,000 Rand figure. For more on this, let's bring in IEC CEO Sy Mamabolo, who joins us now via our video link. It's great to have you on the program, sir. Thanks very much indeed for making time. Now, the paying of these deposits, we understand, there's provision for it in the Electoral Act, and essentially it's some kind of undertaking that these political parties who want to contest elections are serious about doing so, and it's not just some frivolous action. But help us understand the reasoning behind this 200% increase in the deposits that you're suggesting.
Yes, I think a point of correction. The previous deposits that were levied in 2019 was 200,000 and not 100,000, as you say. So the increase is therefore 100,000 increase. But the key factors of consideration is the fact that those deposits were last adjusted in 2014. So there's close to 10 years since they were last adjusted. So they are being adjusted for inflation. That's one. It's a very important thing. But you make a very important point when you say the primary objective of the election deposits is to ensure that parties of substance make their way onto the ballot, and we obviate any frivolity, because we do need South African citizens to make a choice on the basis of parties that are serious and are of substance. Now, if you think about it, the deposits are therefore intended to ensure that the right to stand for office is properly, to stand for political office, and if elected to hold office, is properly regulated. Secondly, to ensure that the right to free and fair election is prepared for in terms of arrangements that can stand scrutiny. Because absent proper arrangement made for elections, the possibility of a free and fair election dissipates. So ultimately, these deposits, as proposed, are trying to give content to the rights that people have.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that correction. It makes a massive difference. So it's a 50% increase more than that 200%. But I suppose there'll still be questions around where this money is going. I don't imagine the parties get it back, do they?
They do. They do. If you win one seat in any of the assemblies that you are contesting, then the money is returned to you. However, if you do not get any seat, the money is forfeited to the National Revenue Fund.
Sure. How worried is the IEC about this becoming some kind of barrier to entry? I mean, it's a bit of a delicate balancing act, isn't it? On the one hand, you do want to sift out those people who aren't serious, but on the other, you don't want this to be such a hurdle that those who are sincere in their contesting this election forfeit that opportunity because they simply can't afford to pay this deposit.
Indeed, it's a very difficult balance that must be struck between the rights of a citizen to stand for political office on the one hand, and meeting the requirements for deposits. That's why the Commission says we can't sit on our own and decide this. That's why we're going out into the public domain and saying, South Africans, here's a matter of immense public importance. Let's hear your views. These are the proposals that the Commission is making. Are we setting these things optimally, or are there things that we ought to be considering as well, over and above what we've put on the table, so that we can then try to come as close as possible to the judicious balance that must be struck, on the one hand, giving effect to the rights of citizens, as well as ensuring that there is no frivolity in the contest.
Yeah. Is there room to have some kind of scale that parties actually pay here? You know, A party like the DA, for example, of the ANC, has been around for quite some time, well-resourced, many people might argue, versus new entrants who are still making a name for themselves. If we're to level the playing field, as it were, is there room for these parties paying a different amount, even though they want to contest the same election?
I'm not sure. I'm not so sure that that is necessarily leveling the playing field. I think you're making them uneven by saying some contestants will pay more than others for a number of considerations, and you've outlined that they've been in the game long enough, so they should be able to afford it. I personally think that it won't necessarily level the playing field, is to create disparities in the playing field. But nonetheless, as regards the independents, the law already provides that the deposits to be levied for the participation of independents must be lower than those paid by independent candidates. In fact, the language of the Act is that may be lower than those paid by the political parties. For instance, for an independent candidate to contest a seat in the National Assembly, they'd have to put a deposit of 20,000, and for to participate in an election of the provincial legislatures, independents are proposed to pay 15,000. I think the legislature acknowledged the fact that an independent is one person. Political parties are massive institutions, and some of them with a very long history of electoral participation.
That's very interesting, because one could argue that the very same principle that made it possible to differentiate between political parties and independents could be used actually to differentiate between political parties themselves.
You could make that argument, but I'm not certain that it necessarily creates a level playing field between the contestation around political parties. But if that's a view that comes through, and it's a view that enjoys sufficient weight and support from the South African public, certainly the Commission will consider that.
Sure. All right. Yeah, I suppose that's why there's public comment processes, right?
Indeed.
Until when is this process open for people who are hoping to have their voices heard?
We're opening this until the 27th of August this year, and the Commission will then go into a process of evaluating all submissions and then making the necessary determinations.
Sy Mamabolo, thanks as always for making time for us to speak to us. Sy Mamabolo, of course, is the CEO of the IEC. I appreciate your insights.